Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. Our topic that we're going to be discussing is accelerating universal artifact delivery, caching strategies for faster repositories, CI/CD, and DevOps workflows. I am the CMO and North American GM of Varnish. My name is Adrian Herrera. With me, I have Guillaume Quintard. Guillaume, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Guillaume Quintard. I'm a technical director at Varnish, uh, solution engineer, developer. I do a tiny bit of everything.
And I mean, we come from different backgrounds and experiences, right? I mean, Guillaume, you're involved from the solutions perspective and just about every deployment in North America and the US and some deployments in Europe. Maybe give a little bit of information on your background and where you're coming from, and I'll do the same.
Yeah, of course. The accent is French, if you didn't pick on that. Um, I have been working for the past 15 years in mostly video, CDNs, distribution. I have been working on around and for Varnish for the past 12 years. Um, and yeah, I've hacked on the core, I've hacked on VMods, I have been support engineer, solution engineer. The past few years, I've been helping bigger customers deploy Varnish at scale, either for video needs, but also regular CDNs, whether they are private, public, internal, external.
Yeah, and we'll dive into how that's relevant to CI/CD workflows and DevOps workflows. That's where we see data challenges coming. I'm coming more from the storage perspective, specifically cloud storage, traditional on-prem storage. I've been in storage for over a decade, and we started with when I moved to Varnish, I thought, hey, I'm finally out of the storage game, but cache is just a different version of storage. It's moving data closer to the client, closer to the users. So it's interesting. We'll talk about some of the differences between an object store and a cache. It has
Yep.
a lot to do with features and functions and why a cache was developed. I mean, a cache is an integral part to just about every technical system today. But we'll have a discussion about that. We're here to talk about CI/CD and DevOps. So maybe we'll start with or start by quantifying or qualifying who this webinar is for, right? So I mean, who do you interface with when you're deploying caches in DevOps, CI/CD, platform acceleration workflows?
Well, I'm going to focus on my crowd, meaning DevOps, and making their life easier, and so that they can iterate faster between builds. They do not have to wait as long when they commit something to get the feedback. And of course, yes, you can run three commits in parallel and then context switch all the time so that you have a full pipeline. But mostly CI/CD is that time, that downtime where you're not doing anything because you're waiting for the machine. Um, so reducing those iterations to the bare minimum in terms of time is something that improves productivity for DevOps. Of course, managers of DevOps are going to like that because that means if we're more productive, we can do more with less, and that time is translated into money.
These centralized repository managers, right? Trying to solve these solutions. They're trying to access different registries, different packages. So maybe just go over a high level where we fit in, where a cache fits into that ecosystem, that environment.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we are cache. So, we are going to be in front of an origin. This is something to realize. We do not create content. We are just going to make access to that content faster. So, we are going to live between the users. So, CI/CD pipeline, the users also installing packages on their laptop, be they npm, NuGet, Maven build, and the actual artifact repository that's holding the objects.
There are a number of solutions that were developed to help make those workflows more efficient, those workflows more cost effective, higher performing. Because when they're higher performing, you utilize your developers, which are usually the most valuable resources within your organization. You just make them more efficient. You don't have them waiting around, just waiting for builds, waiting to access artifacts. So, again, there are these central repository or vendor specific platforms, and they have their own caches. You have traditional CDNs, which are really meant to move caches closer to the user, and then you have third party caches like Varnish. So we're going to discuss those and the pros and cons of each one. But first, maybe walk everyone through the modern development bottlenecks. Like what's going on there? Like what are the pain that DevOps, SREs, platform engineers are experiencing?
I touched on it just before. The problem is time. Uh, Things take time when you have a CI/CD pipeline. Usually, a developer is going to work locally, code, probably run some local tests, but those local tests are not everything that needs to happen. You probably want to build whatever project multiple times because it's running on multiple architectures. So you want to make sure it builds everywhere. Maybe you are going to also create packages. Like if you're deploying on Debian based, Red Hat based, you want to package that for NPM, for example. There is on top of the I'm going to build, I'm going to test, I'm going to package, I'm going to push that to a repository. Um, and after that, downstream of publishing the packages, you may have a cascading pipeline. Like, oh, some pipeline is going to realize I have new packages. So I'm going to rebuild my Docker image, for example. And it may happen like 10 times, for example, because depending on how crucial or how upstream your package is, it may trigger a cascade of pipelines. And all that takes time. Likely you need one step or one pipeline to finish before you can start the next one. And so the shorter each pipeline is, the shorter each step is, the faster you can get to the next. So you are going to have that race or that compromise between should I spend human time optimizing on the pipeline going fast, or do I throw money at bigger machines? And you are going to reach a point where it doesn't make sense to throw more money or more human time. And a big bottleneck that you are going to have in those pipelines is setting up the build environment. Because if your package has dependencies, you need to retrieve those dependencies. You need to reset them up, maybe recompile them, and reacquiring all those resources over and over takes time. That yeah, maybe we can help with that.
Yeah, and what are you seeing as far as the artifact sizes? I mean, are the artifact sizes increasing over time? You mentioned you've been doing this for quite some time. So over the last 8 to 10 years that you've been working in this space, not just in artifact acceleration, but in content delivery, what have you seen from the file size perspective?
It has grown. I mean, mostly because with fiber, notably, we are able to push more bytes over the network, and there has been that. I'm not going to say careless attitude because I'm going to sound like Grandpa Simpson, but because we have more network capacity, we we are okay with pushing more data. We are not necessarily optimizing as we were when we like 56K connections. Um, the quality of what we are able to produce on the video side is also a lot. It's also a lot better, meaning objects are heavier. So we are pushing more and more, but with artifacts, the problem is that it's compound. Is you're not just watching one 4K stream. You are trying to acquire 50, 200, 1,000 artifacts that have all grown in size. So there is definitely a heavier burden on the traffic and on the network. And that means it's going to take a lot more time. Also, we have teams that are a lot more distributed, meaning the network leg is bigger. We have more locations, so all that compounds in a lot more stress on the machines, on the network, and that means that everybody's paying that price in the form of time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you mentioned lengthy build times. You mentioned developer frustration. You mentioned kind of operational complexity, right? And I mean, whenever you're transferring data across geographies, regardless of where you are, you're paying for the bandwidth and egress in some way. You're either paying for a direct connect, or you're paying it in egress fees. If you're hosting your solution on a hyperscaler. Um, Overall, there was the promise of centralized repositories, and I think what are you seeing as far as the satisfaction rate for some of these centralized repositories? Yes, they're great solutions. Yes, they're great platforms. But what's going on? Like, what do you hear from the feedback perspective? You said you deal with a lot of large customers.
Yes. Honestly, centralized repositories are great when you start because they do everything, and it's one solution. Everything is included. It's easy. It's exactly the same thing that we've seen with the cloud. I don't need my machines. I can just push them. Or hey, there's Kubernetes. I can just run stuff inside there. So there is that. Hey, it's easy at first, but nothing comes for free. There are caveats, there are compromises. The fact that the repository is centralized, and I'm going to take centralized here in two different meanings. The first one is it's centralized in the sense that it does everything. It does delivery, storage, scanning, etc., etc. You are going to have you cannot be at 100% everywhere. So usually you pay the price in terms of performance. The storage needs to be available, it needs to be resilient, but yeah, performance usually is at the back because the functionality is more important than how fast you can achieve that functionality. And the second thing is the centralized in the geolocation term. Having something that is centralized, that it's the only thing you need to worry about, is great. But of course, the problem is it's only where it is. If you have a distributed team, which happens, I mean, we have amazing communication means across the globe. So if your storage is on the west coast of the US and you have developers in Japan, India, Europe, um, East Coast, South America, they all need to go back to that central repository, which, again, back to my point, network latency, it adds to that thing. And you need to do that for every single package. So more time that needs to be paid.
Yeah, so performance bottlenecks, right? Higher operational overhead, vendor lock-in. This is a big one. We're hearing this from a few different customers. They sign on with a central repository manager, and then they experience some sort of performance issue, and one of two solutions is proposed. It's either, hey, buy my edge node solution, right? And it'll cost you this much more. And in no way do they ever want to decrease the cost of the subscription that they're already offering. Or on the service side, they say, oh, of course this is available to you, but you need to subscribe to the higher tier to get access to this functionality.
Yes. And I mean, we're essentially seeing the same thing as the cloud. The first is, oh yeah, our performance is not good. You can pay extra to get performance, as you mentioned, or you can also move to a cloud cloud-based solution with a service, which of course is going to cost you more because now you also need to pay the network, the traffic, because that solution that is very intimate, it should be internal. Those artifacts are only meant for your developers. Now you need to externalize that to a service that's in the cloud, and you need to reach out and fetch the artifacts back in. So while I understand how do services or how those companies are offering the those evolution, I feel like this is also a step to the side rather than truly forward.
And then a little more on those vendor specific caches. So when a vendor comes in and they have their own edge cache solution, is that universal? Does that work with other central repositories?
No, this is, I mean, of course, and I'm a developer, so I completely understand the approach here. Usually, when you have a cache for that centralized solution that is offered by the company, it's going to be intimately tailored towards that specific solution. Meaning you cannot carry it over if you ever switch. So that reinforces the vendor lock-in, which, I mean, centralized mean you only have to worry about one thing, which is great from an operational point of view until the moment you decide to move, because you are going to negotiate contracts at the management level and the procurement. But for the people on the ground doing the maintenance and switching from one solution to another, it's pain. Because artifacts are usually a very critical part. So you cannot just say, well, you know what, we are shutting that one down and we are going to pick that up in the summer when we have resources. You need to have that service running constantly all the time. So and you need to think about a strategy to switch vendors in a way that doesn't disrupt your developers, which can be a headache.
Yeah, so I mean that's a good segue into okay, well let's take a look at some of the more vendor neutral ways to improve performance. And one of them I think is the biggest content delivery networks. Right.
Yes.
So, content delivery network, that was the sole purpose that they were created is to speed up the delivery of data on the internet by moving the data set as close to the user as possible. There's different approaches from a content delivery perspective. Um, but let's talk about the CDN here in from the workflow perspective. I mean, what are the pros and cons of using a traditional CDN like a Cloudflare, like an Akamai, like a Fastly here?
I mean, the big benefit here is, okay, it exists. You have the capacity. There's the network. It is probably sort of easy, notably because now the artifact repositories tend to be good at using content addressing, meaning if you have a different object is going to be held under a different URL. So that makes things really easy to cache. And you are going to have only a few endpoints that are not going to be too cacheable. So the rules are usually better are easier to set up for policy caching. There are some big corner cases that are going to bite you, but generally you are sort of okay. I think my main problem would be that those CDNs are public. Your private artifacts are going to be on the internet. Sure, you are going to have signed cookies, signed URLs to protect them, but I have a philosophical but fundamental problem with my content being held in a public CDN when, as I said, this is stuff that your developer inside your network needs, and they need it inside your networks. So reaching out to the open internet to fetch back your content is a tiny bit weird, especially if your artifact repository is inside your network. That means you are inside your network, you're reaching out to the open internet, so the open internet can go back into your network to fetch the object and send it back to you internally. I my My education is in telecom engineering. So yes, we have the speed, we have the pipes to make that fast, but that's a lot of hops between internal and external that bothers me.
Yeah, and a lot of hops that you just don't know where they are, right? I mean, once you hit the public internet, you really don't have control of how the CDN routes your data and where they route your data.
Yeah,
And that's and we're also talking about, I mean, we kind of briefly touched about this or touched on this point, but I mean, when you do integrate with these workflows, you still need to store access credentials, correct? And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, once you start going over the public internet, I understand you're obfuscating and you're using secret keys, but do you still need to transfer maybe those secure credentials over the public internet if you're using traditional CDN? Is that a risk?
I mean, I'm going to talk about S3, and CloudFront is going to be an overlay to that. But S3 has signed URLs. The problem is if somebody has the URLs, they can access whatever is behind them. Uh, but those URLs are time limited. They have an expiration date, which can be relatively low. That being said, again, this is your private content, and it feels like a cop out. It's a solution. It doesn't feel like it should be a problem that we need to fix. So it's more a problem added to another problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. Your private content, right? Your private content. And
Yes.
we covered a scenario where a central repository, yes, it's your private content, but the central repository really tries to own your private content, lock your private content into their
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah.
On the CDN side, you have, the risk of putting your private content over the public internet. So now let's talk about vendor neutral caching software, the vendor
Hey.
neutral approach, the third party cache. This is where we fit in. There's others that fit into this space too. Let's talk about the pros and cons there. I mean, we've been doing this for a very, very long time, right? At our core, we're reverse proxy. You mentioned that we sit in front of the repository manager and the registry. As far as the benefits of a third party vendor neutral solution, can you walk people through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you are going to get not the best of both worlds because you're going to get even more than the CDN and the vendor specific solution. Varnish is CDN software. I mean, this is basically how we define ourselves. We can do load balancing, we can do access control and that kind of things. But we started as uh, CDN software, so we are going to have the same benefits as a CloudFront or an Akamai, except this is your software that you install where you want, including inside your network, which solves probably my biggest issue with CDNs, which that back and forth between the outside and the inside. Here, everything can stay local. You get control over where you install your nodes, and they can be Kubernetes, they can be physical machines, they can be VMs, they can be EC2. I mean, if you decide that your private network is inside AWS, it works for us, and you decide where they should go because you know where your users are. When you use a CDN, you trade that ease of use for a lack of control. And here you do not have to pick that up. You have a tiny bit more maintenance because you now own the machines, or you can give that to us, either way. But you pick the topology of your CDN. Compared to a CDN, I think that's the main advantage. Versus the vendor specific, um, well, we are vendor neutral. So, but yeah, you can apply us on top of Artifactory, on top of Nexus, on top of Harbor. If you want to use it in front of a Docker repository or open internet npm, you can do that. For us, it's all HTTP in the end. We are adding a few rules because we know the business. So we make it, we streamline it for the artifact usage. But it's just regular caching. We can hook into your access control mechanism so you do not have to worry about, oh, but who does the access control now? You still do that. We just hook into it so that you do not have to re-implement everything in the caching layer. So that if that gives you the control that you need to give away with the CDN, but it also doesn't lock you with one vendor. Even better, you can have multiple vendors or multiple solutions behind a single platform of caching. Varnish can detect, oh, this is a this is an npm artifact, I should go there. This is that kind of docker image, I should go to Quay, for example, rather than on the Docker Hub. If you are switching artifact repositories, you can still have Varnish in front, and Varnish can bounce between the two to get you exactly the one you want as you're transitioning, for example. So that is us, leveraging not just the caching, but the fact that we are full on reverse proxy, and that we can load balance, we can route based on the rules that you define.
Yeah, you mentioned secure access controls, universal access, driven by being an HTTP proxy and being able to route based upon rules, simplified management, of course, the performance and cost efficiencies. But let's talk about something. I know, you're pretty close to this topic, observability, because hey, this sounds great, third party cache. There are some areas where third party cache isn't as feature complete as maybe an integrated solution into a central repository
Yeah.
platform. One of those is observability for that specific platform. But walk us through observability, external observability, and observability across the entire application layer.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I know you're feeding me a softball here for the audience. I've been working for the past 6 months around OpenTelemetry integration with Varnish, but observability is not just you know OpenTelemetry. It's really, how can you tell what's happening? Is something bad? And it's going to go from metrics, counters, logs, and tracing more recently. And Varnish has been always excellent in the observability front. From the get go, even 15 years ago, we had hundreds of metrics telling you how many requests you got, how many you got cached, how full is your cache, and everything. Logging, again, if for the people listening, if you've never seen Varnish logs, look at them. They are going to give you an almost scary amount of information per request. It's not. It doesn't have to be just one line. Um, so this is those are things that we always had, but now we are in a world where we need to actually be able to push them, and 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 not just so that people can look at Varnish, but can look at the platform of which Varnish is a part of. So observability is really extracting the information, but also collating it and connecting it with other signals. So this is extremely important. Tracing is basically what allows us to say, oh, I had that request from the outside, and it translated into 20 internal requests from microservice B to microservice C, and down the stack. So it's very important that whatever you add to your system is actually able to integrate and contribute to that. Data lake is probably overblown as a term, but this is what you want. It shouldn't be, oh, I have Varnish in front and therefore I don't know what's happening. I get a hit ratio value, but yeah, because Varnish is not contacting the origin because that's its goal, protecting the origin, it's not contributing to the rest of the observability, setup. So with with our offer, with our tools, basically we make sure that Varnish is able to contribute back, uh, whether directly to Artifactory or to Datadog or Splunk or Grafana, whichever platform that you're using, we can push our metrics there, and therefore you can alert and do that kind of things. So because there's nothing worse as an operational than to see, oh, I'm not receiving traffic on the origin anymore. Okay, and I'm alerting on that, and then you need to pull that thread and try to, okay, is it because of service A or is it service B? And then you need to investigate, and you need to hook or to hop onto different systems, try to understand what's happening. If you can have just one dashboard and one alerting system where you can correlate everything, that's the dream.
Yeah, and that, I mean, this is at the heart of simplified management, right? And operational resilience. I mean, this
Absolutely.
this is critical to that. I mean, we went over the tangible benefits from a performance improvement, faster access to dependencies, quicker, iterations. You opened up with that. We talked about cost savings. I think this is less of a business focused blog or a business focused webinar, more of a technical focused webinar. So I mean, we have a number of assets. If someone really wants to dive deep into cost savings and the actual percentage of improvements, they can go take a look at those assets at varnish-software.com. But from a high level, let's just talk conceptually. I mean, how much faster, how much savings have we seen or have our customers seen?
Yes. I mean, again, it's going to depend on everybody's setup, because yeah, do not take the numbers I give out here as a promise. And also, it's easier for people to infer their own numbers if they do have observability on their pipeline. So we go back to observability is important. Knowing how much time is spent where is extremely important. In our case, I have seen pipelines that would take 12 minutes go down to 4, because that was mostly Jenkins jobs needing to reinstall Debian packages so they could then pull npm packages for a TypeScript build. So a lot of the time was about retrieving new information, um, because they were running on container images that were completely clean of metadata. So you need to retrieve all the metadata, compute the dependencies. And so you spend a lot of time doing stuff over and over. And a lot of time it's dragging artifacts from the internet, or if you're lucky, local network, but it's still a lot of stuff. And I was working in a company with a lot of CI/CD pipelines running at the same time. So they were all hammering the uh, Artifactory at the time, uh, all at the same time. And while Artifactory is quite good at knowing, oh, you have the right to download this, pulling data from the storage is slow. So dividing the time by 3 is actually quite a good feat. You have to remember that there's still compilation that's going to take CPU time, and we cannot cache that. But yeah, that was quite a good number. I think it's not the biggest one that we've seen, but I think it gives a ballpark here, without being you know without being too markety.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean we are also seeing some trends. I think we mentioned, I mean, we cover the or the vendor specific cache. We covered, traditional CDNs. We covered, third party neutral caches, which Varnish is one of. Um, as far as what's coming down the line for Varnish, just a little preview. I mean, we often see that we start with a central repository like Artifactory or a Nexus, a Sonatype. How about Git? I mean,
Yeah.
let's have a very very brief conversation about Git. I mean, where do you see the value of a caching solution in Git workflows?
I mean, exactly the same. Um, Git is holding artifacts. I mean, this is what it was built for. Um, and usually the first thing you do when you are going to trigger your CI/CD pipeline is doing a Git clone somewhere, whether it's a shallow clone or a full blown clone, or maybe just getting an archive of your source commit. But you often are going to download it from a Git platform. So this is something that we have our eyes on. Um, we already have Git support because Git has that protocol that is a tiny bit old now. It's not necessarily super friendly for caching, but if you have a lot of traffic, it becomes beneficial really quickly. What we are looking at is to see if we can cache individual commits, and really expand on the cacheability. I won't go too much into the details, but like we're already pretty good for high traffic setups. We want to make it like absolutely blazing fast, even if you do not have that many pools. I mean, this is really something I love. Just to go on a tiny detour here. Uh, when people start using caching, their minds open. They're like, oh, we are caching that. It goes super fast. Could we apply that here? And and usually the answer is yes, because it's HTTP. There are a few things that we are not gonna touch, like WebSockets, for example. Uh, but if it's HTTP, we can probably help quite a lot. And yeah, I really love to see DevOps rediscovering the benefits of caching and how versatile it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is where the data issue and the data challenges seem to be moving to, right? First it was, 10 years ago, websites, images, right?
Yeah,
Then it moved to video, right? And
yeah,
now we're seeing it in back-end workflows, specifically for, data hungry workflows, really driven by I don't want to throw out and say, hey, we're AI washing here, but all of these AI ML workloads and machine to machine kind of communication, it's just creating a lot of data that developers, DevOps teams, platform teams now need to support.
yeah. I'm honestly amazed that it took us so long before throwing the AI word around. But yeah, AI is another domain where you need caching. The and here it's mainly because the GPUs that you're going to use to train on your data sets are so fast. I mean, we are talking about one of the things that is the slowest, the network, that needs to feed something that is one of the fastest, like GPU memory. And yeah, having your local their artifacts, but whether or not we like that term or not, your data sets that you're going to train on are artifacts. And so if you have a cache that is close to your GPU farm, that means you can deliver the data faster to your GPUs and make sure they are fed constantly. And you can operate like always or as close to possible as 100% capacity rather than idling, waiting to buffer that data set.
And that was a good little preview on some of the things that we're working on here at Varnish. We're coming to the close of the webinar now, and we covered the acceleration strategies to make CI/CD repository and DevOps workflows faster. Now, let's say someone said, "Hey, I love what you just said. I'm sold." How fast can they get stood up with a third-party caching solution like Varnish, or let's just say Varnish specific? How quickly could they get stood up with Varnish?
Um, we have code on our public GitHub repositories. You will need access to Varnish Enterprise, but once you have access to that, you can talk to one of our salesperson. Um, an hour, an hour and a half if you're having a coffee break.
Yeah. So we're not talking days, we're not talking weeks or months. It's
No,
it's
no,
pretty fast, same day.
it's. I mean, as we said at the beginning, Varnish passes data, uh, you know, to and from. So as long as you're able to get a machine, install Varnish, grab the configuration that we have on our Git repositories, tweak a few things because you need to tell Varnish where to fetch the data. Point your client at Varnish rather than at the origin directly. Open the floodgates and yeah, measure the benefits. That's honestly that's all it takes.
And to get started, all people need to do is to go to varnish-software.com, go to the chat feature, request a personalized demo, request more information. We obviously have a number of white papers. We have a number of other videos in our resources section of the website so that you can learn more. So now that we're coming to the close, Guillaume, any closing words of advice, words of wisdom for everyone out there?
Apart from measure, observe. Um, you may not you may not know that you need caching in your life, but have a look at your CI/CD pipelines. Look at how much time you're spending downloading data, and if it's a big chunk of the time you're spending building, then maybe we should talk.
Thank you for your time, Guillaume.
Always a
Thank
pleasure.
everyone, all viewers for your time. If you have any additional questions, just go to varnish-software.com, click on the chat feature and ask away.